So, welcome to the first UXPA-UK event of 2021. My name is Chris. I am the current president of UXPA-UK. We have had obviously a big change in presidents around the world, but I'm afraid I'll probably be here a little bit longer, but I'm sure there will be someone even better than me to follow very, very soon. I see a few familiar names in the attendee list. I think Penny, I think you've been an ever-present throughout our remote events, so thank you for joining again, and welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome to those of you who are joining us at another remote events, and obviously welcome to those of you who have experience of us in more normal time, shall we say, when we've been able to hold these fantastic in-person events. Just a little bit about UXPA UK. We have been going for around 18 years supporting the UX industry in the UK. The roots of UXPA UK go back to 2003 in the autumn. We are run entirely by volunteers, so we put these events together in our spare time. We all have roles, various roles in the industry, and put these events together in our, evenings, weekends, cheeky lunch break sometimes. Although I hope my employer isn't listening in. I've lost count of the times I've said in normal times over the past few months, but we are usually more active socially. We regularly hold, or used to regularly hold, in-person events in London, and hopefully things are looking more positive towards the middle of the year now the vaccines are rolling out, and perhaps we can get back to that as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we will still keep holding these remote events, so please do keep attending because your contribution is very welcome. We also run workshops where we can, and also have a mentoring scheme. The best way to keep informed about our activities is to sign up to our monthly newsletter, and you can do that on our website, uxpa-uk.org. A date for the diary is our next event, which is confirmed as Thursday, the 18th of February, which is OOX, or Object-Oriented UX, which ties in with World IA Day. So for those who are into organizing data and information architecture. As I said, we are run by volunteers, and every year or two we welcome a new cohort. And I know some of these are on the course. I would like to say a big welcome and hello to Sharon, to Graham, to Makayla, and to Radhika, who will be supporting our activities throughout the year. And Sharon is the person to speak to regarding our mentoring scheme. And speaking of our mentoring scheme, we are, of course, always looking for contributions from the community. UXPA is a community interest company. We are a non-profit, so everything that we generate goes back into supporting our activities, but we do rely on the support of the community. So if you are interested in becoming a mentor, please do let Sharon know at mentoring@uxpa-uk.org. And to be a mentor, you don't have to be a head of or a lead or a director. The most common situation is that we have people who are looking to get into UX, and it's that very first step that is the problem. So they need someone who has 1, 2, 3 years of experience just to share stories with, run ideas past, just to make that first step into the industry. We hold monthly events. It looks like for the foreseeable future, these will remain remote. So we're always keen to reach out to potential speakers. So if you work in a specific sector, such as healthcare, automotive design, etc., please do reach out to myself or Lena in the first instance. And over the coming months, we'll be putting together a series of UX events, usually based around certain themes, or if you just have an idea that you'd like to explore with us, please do let us know. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to give thanks to Lena, who is the chapter secretary, for putting this event together and arranging the speakers. And I will hand over to her to introduce today's event.
Hi, everyone. It's so glad to be back. 2021, January. I don't know about everyone else, but I've been down in the dumps. So this is definitely something that I've been personally looking forward to, rather than continuing my mundane lockdown life. For those of you not in England, I see we have people from Istanbul and America and Stockholm and Berlin and Germany. For those of you not living in England, we've been in a lockdown, as I'm sure as other countries have been. So definitely something to look forward to, are these little virtual events that break down life as we know it. When I was starting to think about curating this event, I was trying to figure out a way we could start a year off at UXPA that wasn't heavy, that wasn't about anything too in-depth, but still was really inspiring and motivational. And we usually do a leadership event in the beginning of the year, but I wanted to switch it from just being how to be a good leader, and try to have a focal point. And from speaking for my own mentor, I realized that being a good leader usually ends up meaning that you're also a good listener, and that you can't really have one without the other. And thus my search for two fantastic speakers came about. First up is going to be Jaslyn from Ottawa, Canada. Thank you, Jaslyn, for joining in the middle of your day. And she'll be speaking on building alignment through research. She's a insight lead at Fullscript, which is a very cool company. And I'm really, I really wish we had a service like here in the UK. And then afterwards, we'll have Caitlin Goodale from Dressed, which is a fashion game. And she'll be approaching the topic about fashion games and leading UX teams, in particular in liminal spaces. We're gonna actually do a Q&A right after Jaslyn's first talk, because she has to hop off to continue her day in Canada. And then we'll close off the evening actually with Caitlin's focused Q&A. And then after all the speakers are done and the Q&A is done, anyone who fancies hanging about and just chatting away, we open the floor to allow everyone to talk, and becomes a little more of a informal networking event. Great. I will now hand off to Jaslyn to share her screen and start her talk. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Just getting set up here. Hopefully you can all see my screen. As mentioned, I'm Jaslyn. I'm an insights lead coming in from Fullscript in Canada. So calling all the way from cold Ontario, where we just had a dumping of snow, which has affected our internet connection. So if it's a little hazy, I apologize. Cold weather problems. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about this issue of learning how to build alignment and what research can do to kind of help with that and help build a story that people can rally behind and leadership can start to build an issue with. So, sorry, as mentioned, I'm an insights lead. I'm at Ottawa. I have worked formally as a UX researcher in previous positions as well. So I do have that UX background, and we're also hiring for a UX researcher right now to kind of expand that function at Fullscript and expand that user perspective. I'm going to be using some examples. So I just want to introduce my company briefly. As Lena mentioned, Fullscript is a online supplement dispensing solution. So if you go and see an integrative health practitioner, and they say that you should be on X, Y, and Z supplements, then you can order those online through Fullscript and get them shipped directly to your house. As I'm sure you can all appreciate, in this isolated and quarantined age, this is becoming a very important solution for a lot of people to get access to health, meaning that our work to understand what our users need and what the market is looking for has become even more important. It also means that my company has come up with many different projects, very excited over the last year, trying to make sure that we can solve all of these problems. And though I love great ideas, I love this expansion of our opportunity, we also need to kind of pull it back and make sure that we have a focused vision that we can roll out. At the beginning of my time at Fullscript, I've been there for just over a year now, that wasn't really where I was leaning my research towards. It was really just getting that understanding of a practitioner and what we can kind of offer. But I realized that there's so much opportunity for research to hone in that focus and make sure that a company is going in a specific direction. And that's what the presentation today is about. So in the beginning of December, my boss, our director of data, came to me and said, hey, we have these 3 really big initiatives and we want to roll these out in 2021. We want to start talking to people about it. We want to start talking to the board about it, but we don't have alignment internally about these projects and how we should get started. And we just have a lot of questions. We have these meetings where we sit down and we talk about all these different things, but we're not really sure how to get started or what's the best idea to get started with. Essentially, what is the market opportunity? What do our users need? And how can we deliver? In a previous role, I worked a lot with this idea of trust and trust building in companies. And I'm kind of framing this problem in a similar way. So when I was doing this reading, I came across this instructor, Paul Zach, who mentions that companies waste a lot of time because employees are wondering, what if? So what could we do with our product is one great example of this. Our product could go in so many different directions with so many different ideas, and they spend time thinking about these things. Don't get me wrong. Often this is a very productive way of thinking, being creative, getting those ideas out, but it can also waste a lot of time. We know that we can only get so much done every year. And if we keep coming up with new ideas and new directions, then we'll never get what we need accomplished well enough for our users to use them. So how do we, again, rein in that focus, rein in that scope? In talking with our internal teams, it seemed like there were 2 main reasons why this lack of alignment kept bubbling up. And the first was trust in that vision. So again, someone presents you with an idea and the story is great. You get swept up in this idea, but you're left with all these questions. Who is this for? What should we be doing for a first step? What exactly is the opportunity? Is this a distraction from other projects? What should we be looking at first? And also a lack of ownership. When you have one person that you're able to go to for all of these questions, it makes it really easy for your team to move forward, for your team to have a single source of truth. But when these projects are really big, such as the projects I was working at with this initiative, people are involved in the marketing team, in the product team, in the sales team, and ownership is kind of all over the place. Often the president or the CEO doesn't necessarily have time to manage every single project. So having an owner can be a really helpful step. As researchers, we don't necessarily have a say in who owns the project, though we can make recommendations. But what we can do is really help with this first piece, making sure that we have trust in the vision. So how do we do that? My main goal in this was to eliminate at least the majority of those what ifs. So the big ones being, how do we start? What are the risks? And what are the opportunities? Enough with these meetings where we sit around and we say, well, what are about all these other things that we haven't considered? Let's start considering them, match those with research so that we can move forward effectively. So as I'm talking, you might think there are two different pieces here. And that's what I quickly came up with. The first piece is, what are we struggling with internally? What are the internal questions? What are the internal barriers? And what can we gather from the outside world? What research can we find that will help with these gaps? So kind of both of those pieces, alignment and opportunity. I'm going to use an example to kind of bring us through these things, this presentation. I know that I mentioned there were 3 key projects, and I'm going to use one of them as an example, just so that we can keep focused ourselves. Fullscript has a mission to help our clinics grow. This is the first thing you see when you go on our website. It's something we talk about all the time, but we found that our product doesn't actually grow with you past a certain point. If you have 10 different practitioners working on different specialties in a clinic, we don't give you the administrative tools, the accounting tools, or necessarily even those really flashy product features that will help you secure that Fullscript experience for a larger clinic. So how do we build our offering so we can offer it to that larger clinic? And what do we need in order to do so? So this is my plan. So after having this conversation of, okay, we need to figure this out, this is what I came up with. First, let's ask internal stakeholders what's going on. What are your questions? What's keeping you up at night? What's preventing us from moving forward? And also, and don't forget, What are you really excited about? When someone mentions a story, what are you saying? Oh, I'm really excited that we'll be able to do that. Oh, I think that's going to make an impact here. Oh, I think that'll really move these metrics. And how can we move that forward? Step 2, what do we already know? Is there a vision that we're aligned towards that we can bring the story together with? Is there research we've done in the past? Is there research I've just done that I can bring forward? And if not, then that brings us to step 3. What new research can we bring in quickly? Again, this 3-week timeline, so that we can build a story and have a really robust vision that people can sink their teeth into. And 4, bring a story together and propose an MVP. So what's that first step and how do we get started? So step number 1, internal survey, understanding where people are at. What are you excited about? What are your main concerns? And what does a minimum viable product look like? Well, here we were literally looking at this one question of what's preventing us from moving forward? What's preventing us from taking these exciting ideas and running with them? And as I mentioned, we found that the issue is 3 main things. The first, the biggest, the one that I want to tackle is what is the story? The second, at a very granular level, how do we start? And the third is what is the opportunity? This might be a great story, but is it really worth it? Are we going to really move these metrics? Are people really excited about it? What percentage of the people we have are excited? What kind of market will this bring us, will this attract? What will bring us into the tool? Something that I find really interesting in a research role is how you take these kind of musings or assumptions and translate them into research. I included this slide after much deliberation because I think matching these concerns with a corresponding hypothesis and then an insight is a really easy way to get non-research stakeholders into a research mindset. Okay, so you don't know necessarily where we should start. Okay, well, let's build a hypothesis that if we start there, this will happen. Or if we have this product, we'll get this kind of attraction. And then find some insight that builds onto that. So for example, let's help larger clinics. Well, why is this something we want to do now? This is a big project. Is this a distraction? We have so many other things on the go. Why right now? Well, the hypothesis is that we currently have large clinics in Fullscript that have needs that are not being met, and they may look elsewhere. So this might be clinics that are already using Fullscript to supply some small part of their need base, or it may be clinics who are looking around on the internet and finding Fullscript and thinking, oh, this would be great if only they had these features. So the idea is that there is appetite for us, and that's a hypothesis we want to test. Step 2, use those resources that you already have. So that could be research that you've used recently. We're running research projects all the time. What can I bring forward? What's still relevant? What have we shared, and what are people familiar with already? Using knowledge that you've recently shared or that you've recently used in conversation is helpful because people are familiar with these ideas already. Relating a new vision to a concept that exists within your company makes it recognizable, which means that people are going to say, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. It's in line with their model of how Fullscript should be growing and how your company should be improving. Similarly, recently at Fullscript, we've come up with these longer term visions, and relating the story back to that is really important. For example, this helping larger clinics idea. If in our 5-year plan, we said, well, 5 years from now, we want to be talking to hospital systems and be able to suit their needs. This is something we have to start growing. And this project is exactly that. It really fits into that 5-year plan. And since there's already been alignment built around those things, it really demonstrates to people, okay, we are working at this vision, and this does ladder up to those other key insights we want to be building. Step 2 really answers that question. How does this project speak to a larger purpose? And how does it fit into our understanding of the company already? So back to our example, helping larger clinics. So I fudged some of the numbers here because this is still a work in progress and I don't want to be too revealing. But we can look at our data warehouse and say, okay, well, we already have this number of clinics that are this size, that are large clinics that were not fitting their needs. And being able to keep them as they grow in the next 2 to 3 years means we'll add this percentage to our revenue. We also looked at the leads that were coming in from sales, and we're able to say something similar. Of all of our leads, this is the percentage that are large clinics, meaning that we could add this percent to our revenue if we were able to suit all of their needs. And as I mentioned, one of our main value propositions as a company is to help clinics grow. Reminding our internal stakeholders of this mission and that we are accountable to this mission kind of helps builds support for this project, meaning that people are on board and excited to continue. So step 3, gathering those primary insights. So what else do we need? I had 3 weeks to do this, as I keep mentioning, which is a pretty short timeline for research. And I found something that was really helpful was to focus in on the scope. Again, I'm a researcher at this company. I'm still in a rather junior position. And I found that really holding on to that focus and really making sure that's clear at the outset helps you translate those ideas further and make sure that you aren't biting off more than you can chew. Optimize for the most impactful research. I'm going to get back to this, but you can't answer every single question that everybody has, but make sure that those big questions people are spending a lot of time in meetings talking about, or is really that big what if, make sure that you're able to address that at least to some extent. In the 3 weeks we chatted with 20 practitioners about these ideas, making sure that we were leveraging that scope and able to talk about those issues that would make the biggest impact. The main question we had was, how will we get started? So what do we need to know and what do we need to learn before we can even turn an MVP out to get more learnings in? What learning is preventing us from even buying into this project in the first place? So for helping our large clinics, we found that in talking to the practitioners that were part of these clinics, there were really 3 main features they needed. Having something that was really obvious and really clear cut for our internal stakeholders made it easy for them to say, oh, of course, if we build these 3 things, that's all we need to do as a first step. I mean, I say that's all, it'll take a full year, but it helps kind of cultivate that understanding. We build that relationship with those clinics, but it also means that we can derive learnings based off of those 3 features. Are we able to build these things? Does it make sense with our mission? Can we extend our experience so that this is encompassed? Those kinds of questions. And step 4, create the story and share. So bringing together all of those pieces to cement a vision. As a researcher, I believe a core tenet of my job is to share data in a way that makes sense. And often this is in the form of a story. There's a lot of research going around from academic institutions talking about how telling data in the form of a story means that it'll stay around longer and have more of an impact. So being able to cement all of these different pieces, steps 1, 2, 3, into a story was something really crucial. Again, boiling that story down and making sure you include the scope when you share helps people understand what you're talking about and what you're going to talk about later. You don't have to talk about everything, but you do have to be transparent about what's relevant and what isn't. Maintain an appropriate level of granularity. I found this to be really important when talking to leaders. If leaders are talking high level about high level problems and you start defining a specific flow within your product, it's going to get lost in translation. This is not the time to talk about specific placement of features or to talk about exactly how these things will be rolled out. You want to stay high level in the right context. Be open and transparent about what data still needs to be uncovered. You can't answer everything, especially in 3 weeks, and you can set yourself up to learn more. So when you set up your MVP, when you set up that next step, make sure that it involves the next stage of learning and be really transparent about that. This is beneficial for 2 reasons. 1, it helps you gain more research and gain more learning from your user base as you're going. And it also cultivates a culture at your company of we build to learn. And when we build to learn, it means that the next build and the build after that are even more well-informed. You're building a foundation that's based not on, oh, this was successful, I guess, but also this is the learning, this is how it will move forward. So this is the story we came up with. And these are kind of 4 pieces that I used to help direct that story. First, relating that back to that overall vision. Helping our clinics grow is a key mission. We got to bring that back. We're accountable to this idea. By building those features that were identified in our research phase, we're able to expand to fit the needs of our large clinics, and we're able to fulfill that promise of growing with them as they expand. Overall, this means that we'll have a higher retention rate and it will contribute to our bottom line. Those are key metrics that our high-level leaders are accountable to. So relating it back to something that will help them sleep at night, help them justify to their board is particularly helpful in selling a story. And what those next steps are. For this project, we recommended working personally with our 3 clinics so that we can, with clinics on these specific features in order to develop a very personalized approach. This will help us understand whether these builds are feasible, whether these clinics start to use them, and whether we're able to solve these problems. After that, we can decide what the best methods will be to roll it out to a larger audience or a larger market. This is something I want to come back to, especially as a junior member at the company. Realizing that you can't answer every question is really important for a researcher, especially given the short timeline. But overall, the best way to answer some questions can be to build something and find out what happens. You can't build and understand and iterate within a short period of time, and it's not necessarily the best to do so anyway. Focusing the research on mitigating the largest risk and then being transparent about what you've done is a way to short circuit this and make sure your leaders know exactly what you did and are on the same page. Set yourself up so that you can learn more soon. Build something so that you can gain something out of it, and as a researcher, become more informed on how to direct the next product decisions. For me, these are some of the key learnings that I took away. Being open and transparent about what data you have and what data still needs to be uncovered. No one expects you to know everything, and being transparent about that actually allows for some really interesting conversations. Include everyone from the beginning. Have those conversations and use your skills to turn those conversations into hypotheses and future insights. Narrow that scope. Getting things that are out of scope will just distract people from the vision. It'll seem too like you're casting too wide of a net, and again, lead to those what ifs that are distracting. Relate those projects back to a vision that people have already aligned on. They've sat in meetings, they've come around to a vision, and they've already done that legwork. Leverage that to sell your story. And circling back to a point I made very early on, push for someone to own it. Having someone you can go to make sure that the research is up to date, that the insights are fulfilling the needs, means that you can do your job much quicker. At the beginning of every project, having to run an internal survey to understand where people are at can be very time consuming. And making sure there's one person to go to who owns that knowledge and who you can go to for support will really help you. So that's all I had for today. But as mentioned, we have an open question period now if there are any questions about my talk and the process we went through for this project.
Okay, thank you, Jaslyn. I can see we have someone has raised a hand in the participants panel. Or have they? If you have, could you please do that again, and we can unmute you so you can speak. But in the meantime, Jaslyn, I guess I have 2 questions. How do you go about communicating the results of research to senior stakeholders? And how do you go about trying to persuade them to action them? So I guess it's one question, but I guess we could split it into 2 if need be.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think that making sure that you have enough time to have in-depth conversations with the leaders that are really making those decisions can make a big impact. So having a big meeting where you present all the results can be fine, but it may seem really time consuming, but having a place where you can just sit down and have a conversation with your president or CEO or chief product officer, whoever will be making those decisions, means that they'll have time to air all of those grievances and really get to the key concerns. In terms of making sure things are actionable, I'd actually encourage the opposite approach of share it as much as you can. Share it with high-level leadership once they're excited about it, once they have some sort of, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Oh, I wonder what we could do. Take it to product management, take it to designers, take it to people who will actually be implementing these ideas and actually be using this research to guide what they're doing, because it means they'll be excited about it as well. Having that support come from kind of that on the ground level will mean that the leadership team will be hearing it from everywhere, and people will start to use these ideas much quicker.
Thank you. We have a question from Seb in the chat. Have there been any research findings that have contradicted the company vision? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Fullscript, we have a customer base who's really, really excited about what we do. We are, as I mentioned, we're an online dispensing solution for supplements, and people can get us their supplements from anywhere. They don't have to go into an office. It's really, really great, and practitioners love that. Our vision sometimes extends much further than that. So we want to expand into not just the supplement market, but other areas of integrated medicine. So for example, these hard goods that you might use, like specific mechanical equipment, such as at-home blood tests or whatever those happen to be, that can help you get well. That's outside of what we currently offer. And to be honest, when I talk to practitioners, it's not something they associate with Fullscript. It's not part of their mental model of what will be offered or what will be contributed by us. But it's something that we're excited to expand into. So we've definitely experienced that idea of our practitioners don't really want this from us or don't really see a need to get this from us. And yet it's somewhere we want to expand. So definitely seen that before. And I think having the conversation of how can we grow an incremental behavioral change so that this becomes very obvious, this becomes part of what they're doing with Fullscript, has definitely been an ongoing conversation.
We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Elizabeth, hello. Good to see that you're at one of our events again. So Elizabeth asks, how would you sell this idea of that meeting when you work in a startup, when you're the first UX designer? So I guess we're talking about perhaps a company that is less mature on the UX maturity scale. How would you go about encourage them to implement the findings of UX research, or even actually adopting that, actually conducting the research in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to this. When I joined Fullscript a year ago, I was the only researcher, and we are hiring right now, but for the first UX research position, this is something I've been advocating for over the past year. And I think that, so if you're a designer and people aren't quite yet doing research, getting any kind of piece of data and bringing research into the story, I think in every single one of your meetings, as much as you can, will really start to kind of grow this understanding that there's value here. When I wrote a little summary for this talk, I gave this kind of ridiculous metaphor that stuck with me of, if you poke something once and it's soft, you're going to want to poke it again. It's kind of that natural instinct. But if you poke something like a brick wall and it's solid, why would you poke it again, right? And I think building your design decisions and using research, using that insight. And when people come to you saying, oh, well, I have this research, it's not just my opinion, it's all this research that comes forward too, we'll kind of start pairing that idea of design solutions come with research, and really solidifying those ideas as you present them. I mean, really, exposure is the best way to, I think, bring about research into a company. Again, I mentioned a few times that I'm still learning. I'm still pretty early on in my career, but inserting yourself in conversations, making sure that if there's a place for research to be mentioned, you do the legwork, you mention it, you bring it forward. It can be a bit of a slow burn at times, but then you'll talk to someone and their eyes will light up and you'll be like, this is exactly what this person was looking for in order to drive a story home. And having those key partners in a company can be super beneficial.
Great. There's another question from Sabrina Duda about using OKRs, and her question is, do you use the OKR model in your company? And they really like how you try to tie your projects to the company mission and values, and that's actually something that stuck out as you were speaking to me as well.
Right. So we are actually implementing a KPI kind of structure at Fullscript. This is not something we've had before. At a previous company I worked with, we did have OKRs, and I'd say that we almost used them to death. We almost use them too much. I think keeping in mind what your overall mission is and what you're overall striving for will be really helpful for driving objectives that make sense. Sometimes people want objectives just for the sake of objectives, but I think it's really a good mechanism for keeping yourselves accountable for ultimately where you want to get at the end of the day. In terms of KPIs, in terms of that key result, I would make sure that that key result maps to whatever behavior you're trying to grow. So I know that many people in this call are coming from a UX standpoint, and your key results, the key results that you're driving for, will end up driving how you design and how you build. So an example that I heard at a recent conference that I really loved is that hotels.com uses time to book as their key result, and they want you to get on there and they want you to get on there and make a booking really, really quickly. And that's their experience, right? Is that it's really easy. It's really easy to find something, and that's the user experience they want. Airbnb wants you to come on and explore and get this general understanding of what you're looking for, wants to encourage the idea of wanderlust and exploring the world and doing all these things. So one of their KRs is how much time their users spend exploring on their website. So they have KRs that look like how many destinations they look like, how many different places to stay they look at before they book something. So their KRs are much more around staying a while and understanding the experience versus hotels.com. That's like, let's get them booked, essentially, right? So the KRs that you use are really going to kind of dictate that build experience. If you've been on Airbnb, I'm sure, I mean, I know I've spent hours on there just looking around and exploring, whereas hotels.com, I've only been on the site maybe a few times, but it's exactly that. If I need to go and get something done, I'll get something done and then I'll be off the site, right? So you really feel that experience as a user, and picking that right KR to match the behavior you're striving for is super important. So I'd make sure to keep that in mind. It's definitely something that we strive towards for sure. So one example of this, we're building them out for each team. And for my team, one of our objectives is to make sure people are using research, people are reading what we're doing. So one of our key R's is the number of views on our research repository. Are people coming in? Are they looking? And that's just really like, people know it's here and people are able to see it. And that's a behavior I want to cultivate, that this is a place people go. So those repeat visits as well is something that we're really focused on tracking. Awesome. Are there any more questions?
No, I think that's everything. Jaslyn, thank you so much for taking the time in your working day. We appreciate that. It is your working day and you probably have a million other things to do. So thanks so much for your talk, and we hope we'll speak again in the future.
Great. Thank you thanks to you both for setting this up. And Caitlin, I'm going to stay around and listen a little bit to yours too. So thanks, everybody.
Oh my gosh, no pressure. Well done. Awesome. Great. Is that to me now?
Yes, so we can hand over to our next speaker, which is Caitlin Gunnell.
Hello. All right, let me share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to do that.
Yeah. So I don't know how I am going to top Jaslyn's talk, actually. So much amazing insight there. Seriously, that was the first thing I really wanted to say, is like, I hope that I can be as eloquent as that as I come across, and hopefully won't swear too much or make your evenings too terrible. But hi, I'm Caitlin. I recognize some faces that I recognize in the chat as well. So hello, people that know me IRL, not that we've seen each other very recently. And I'm here today to talk about fashion, games, and UX. I have this slightly pretentious subtitle of leading design in liminal spaces, and we'll get on to what that might mean, or if it's totally meaningless, as we go through the talk. So thank you for having me, and really looking forward to start. So when I was approached about this, around the topic of leadership through listening, honestly, to begin with, I was quite overwhelmed. Leadership, we all know, is such a huge topic. You know, people make entire careers off of doing talks around it. And even then, when we go down into design leadership and UX design leadership, there is so much data, research, writing about this topic. I was trying to think for myself, what can I give you as the audience that might be new or might be interesting? And so that's why I've narrowed it down to this quite specific area of myself, as someone who's now worked in design for over 10 years, wildly, but taking on my first head of role as the head of UI and UX at Dressed. I've been there for 4 months now, and I have 4 kind of lessons that I've learned in that time for UX leadership that I want to share with you. So that's what we're going to focus on today, and I am really looking forward to that. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the context on what I do. So Dressed is, as was amazingly described right at the start by Lena, a fashion game startup. And now what that means is it's a game that has, we call real, virtual, real ties to the real world. So in this game, you have challenges that come up that are about styling. So, style this person for a magazine cover, or, Gucci have made this new collection and now you have to see what the model will look like in it. And all these cool and wacky different challenges, some based on movies, some based on like TV shows and things that are coming out, some based on trends in the industry. And what you do is you're then, as a player, presented with a model on canvas, and we have an amazing cast of diverse models as well as some supermodels that have came in relatively recently. And you get to dress them with real clothes that actually exist in the real world and then can be bought if you're that way inclined. And that is the core of the game. And so this may be similar to some games you might have experienced. I know myself, I grew up playing The Sims. My first experience of making games was actually designing clothes for The Sims. So, this is obviously like an area that lots of people are passionate about. But Dressed as a whole has kind of several components to it when you start thinking about it from a player UX perspective. We have that styling component where you go in and do all those things I was talking about, add clothes onto the model and see how they look together. But then you're actually able to rate the looks of other people. So you can see, okay, well, what was this challenge about and how have other people responded to the same brief? And you can kind of cast your critical styling eye on them and tell them if they were any good or not. And then actually there's another loop round where you can then, if you're feeling flush, you can buy that Gucci bomber that you've applied to your model. Maybe not me right now, maybe when payday comes tomorrow, that might be what I get in on. But so that's kind of the general loop of the game, where obviously I actually know my game designers in this call, so we're looking at other loops as well. But that's kind of the core of what Dressed is and what Dressed has been. And this is obviously like as a player experience and also then as a UX designer, some really interesting challenges, because it really crosses over between what is e-commerce, what is fashion, what is luxury, and what is a game, and how does it sit between those? And how do you make an experience between those? So a few more examples. Recently we did a collaboration with the new Wonder Woman movie release. So we collaborated with Warner Brothers so that actually you could use the real costumes from the movie actually on characters in the game, and do challenges that were based around the plot of the movie, and lots of really exciting stuff like that. We've added lots of hair and makeup, again collaborating with different brands. Recently done a lot of collaborations with Gucci, but Louis Vuitton, Burberry, a lot of high-end designer things, as well as up-and-coming new designers. And one of the most recent ones I'm so excited about as a big nerd is a collaboration that we just released this week with a digital fashion brand called Ouroboros. I say they're a digital fashion brand because you can't buy these clothes in real life. To be honest, some of them break the laws of physics. So I don't know if I would actually be able to have them in my wardrobe at home without causing some sort of black hole. But they are a brand to release digital clothes, and now at Dress we are allowing players to use those clothes within the real game, within real challenges, which I just think is super weird, but also really cool. So as a company, and as a product, we've got a lot of really interesting and really positive feedback, specifically from the fashion industry. From Vogue, from Harper's Bazaar, which coincidentally our CEO of Dress, Lucy Yeomans, she was the editor-in-chief at Harper's Bazaar, so no correlation. But Fast Company and a lot of startup places. So we've got some really fantastic recognition in the luxury press and for the experience that we're creating. However, you'll notice there aren't really games publications here, and that was why I was trying to look at what I can bring to this talk today. And actually the reason I was brought into Dress is because of my specific background and what I could offer, because we talked about it's quite a strange game / product / e-commerce that combines some of the most amazing and exciting things about the fashion industry, about the games industry, and about startup industry and app technology. But turned out we were actually lacking a lot of that game experience within the game. That's fair, you know, that totally will happen. So that was what I came in to try to help with. So I'm Kate, I am a she, her, and my experience previous to joining Dressed 4 months ago was kind of broad. You know, most recently before now, I worked at Memrise, which is a language learning company, kind of leading our product design for research and development. So on kind of new projects, looking at kind of the gamification of language learning and how to teach languages through play and what that experience is as a learner. But prior to that, I have worked, I would say, a lot within different sorts of the games industry. I've been at King, where I worked on a bunch of casual mobile games, generally for, I like to call it like making games for your mum, making games for an audience that never would consider themselves gamers, but actually are very, very hardcore. So totally different UX challenges. And prior to that, I was at Microsoft doing augmented reality, virtual reality, also mobile games, but also products and creative apps. And I was also in Minecraft as a texture artist, as a pixel artist. So I was trying to take all of that learning and knowledge and all of my background and then apply it to what are the specific UX problems that Dressed has and how can I help them to solve those? And what that is really at the core of it is, what is this line between fashion and gaming? What is this liminal space? We'll get to it. And how can we cross over between that, or how can we bring the best of both of them? So onto the juicy stuff, which is the 4 lessons. And the first thing I would say is these are not lessons for you. I'm not telling you how you need to live your lives or how you need to run your UX teams. But what I'm saying is these are 4 things that I have learned, lessons that I have internalized in my journey as a UX leader within Dressed, that I am hoping, no matter what sort of challenges you're facing, you know, we all work in, you know, hopefully, but all of us, you know, that are working in a UX profession or some sort of design profession, we all have to, you know, merge ideas between different spaces, whether it's, you know, working in insurance, but it's also blockchain, or you're working on an app that's teaching languages, but also needs to feel like a game. No matter, you know, how exciting or how mundane, that seems really mean. No matter what you're working on, we're always having to cross these boundaries and figure out the middle spaces between things. So I hope some of these lessons will be helpful for you. If they're not, I apologize. You still have to listen to me for another 15 minutes. Then you can leave. So the first lesson, and that is develop a shared language so you can clash productively. As I mentioned previously, languages are something I'm passionate about. I speak passable Swedish, totally not passable Mandarin, and a tiny, well, some English as well, I guess. And, you know, we spoke right at the start about this word liminal. And liminal, for those who haven't heard it before, means relating to the transitional or initial stage of a process and occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold. Now, I don't use this word in my talk just to seem pretentious, although probably because I am, but I find that this is a really great example, or a really great descriptor of you know, what it means to work between industries or in that middle space. I'm including it here as an example because if someone knew, like some pretentious, terrible person like me, used this in a conversation, you would expect to say, hey, what does that mean? Sorry, or like, could you explain a little bit? That would be perfectly normal because it's kind of a strange word. It's not a normal parlance. Apparently it's technical, but yeah, maybe I'm just technical. But then when it comes to design, I think if anyone who is motivated enough to spend their Thursday evenings listening to design talks probably has a perspective on what design is already, and I would assume, and I'm sure, a lot of experience and knowledge about, you know, what good design looks like and how design should work and what the design process is. However, when you start thinking fashion design, actually your perspective amongst the people in the audience probably is going to be different between each of you. You know, one of you may think of, you know, the runway and like models walking down with these amazing garments. You know, you might be thinking of Project Runway and like Tim standing over you as you're like chopping a piece of muslin worriedly in the workroom. But some of you thinking fashion design might think editorial design. You might think, you know, people making these amazing magazine spreads, you know, like splashing makeup everywhere and like photographing models and, you know, arranging the typography around them. So actually, design within a fashion context already has a broad variety of meanings. But then the same comes to game design. Again, depending on the background of all of you here, some of you, when you hear game design, you might immediately think, oh, someone programming in a game engine and, you know, making things happen. You might think of the idea guy or girl or person who, you know, sits back in their chair and says, yes, I think this game should be about destroying piñatas, which, to be fair, is one of my favorite games. Or you might think of someone, you know, sitting in a chair, you know, making spreadsheets or, you know, writing cards and making board games. Could be super broad. Then when you hear UX design, well, I don't need to tell you what you think, because I think all of us probably, if we're attending this talk, have some knowledge of UX design, at least. However, I think all of us are still going to have different perspectives on what it means, you know, where that boundary between UX and user research sits, if there is a boundary, in fact, you know, what is UI? Let's not mention that word, but, you know, is UI a part of UX? Could it be the responsibility of a UX designer? Same for KPIs, as was discussed in Jaslyn's talk as well, you know, all of these different areas and what the responsibility of a UX designer and a UX design team is will change depending on your background. So why have I spent so long talking about design in my design talk? The issue is when you come to a company that is sitting between two industries or that has people like Dress does, you know, our CEOs from Harper's Bazaar and my boss was a CPO at another games company, you know, like totally different worlds. I'm, you know, I think I'm from an entirely different planet, to be honest, but that's just me. These people from different worlds will start talking about general terms like design, and they might think they're talking about the same thing, but they're actually probably not talking about the same thing. And especially when this comes to processes and running a team, you can come up against big issues and, you know, what does it, you know, what does it mean to have a good UX process, or like what does design sign-off look like? Design sign-off means a totally different thing in the fashion editorial world than it does in a UX product design company. And that's why building this shared language between you is so important. The good thing is, inspiration comes from these clashes between disciplines, and that's actually the glorious part. You know, even though it's quite stressful trying to figure out what do you actually mean when you say it doesn't look luxury enough, we'll get onto that one, that is where you actually find the magic of what your particular product is or your particular problem that you're trying to solve as a company. Because you figure out, you know, for us, we figured out, well, what, you know, if my editorial designer is telling me this isn't luxury, this app interface, has anyone made a luxury game? If they have, please tell me, because I would love to research it. The fact is, I can't find anyone that's made a luxury game or, you know, successfully made a luxury game. And so us trying to figure out what does luxury mean in a games context, you know, is it the responsiveness of a UI? Is it the level of animation used? Is it the styling on your buttons? Is it actually the fact that your interface and your experience is crafted towards each person so it feels personalized? Actually figuring that stuff out, we would never have known any of that stuff if we hadn't had these arguments about what good UX looks like and what design actually means. So I'm saying that build that language together, but it will be difficult, but that is like the building blocks behind building a strong design team across disciplines. I promise the other lessons are slightly shorter. So we've discussed having a shared language, which is fantastic. But the second lesson that I learned was that ineffective design comes from bad UX processes. again, this might not be news to all of you, but I think seeing it in the real world was just like so, made it so real for me. So when I joined Dressed, I think there was a laundry list of things that we wanted to fix. You know, as soon as first meeting with my manager was like, yep, and you know, it doesn't feel like, or it doesn't feel enough like a game. We need to add in this feature. We need to add in this sort of animation and do this thing and this thing. And especially when you come in to lead a team, it can be very easy to get stuck into solving those problems straight away. Like, oh yes, okay, you know, we don't have an animation pipeline in right now, so we need to work with our engineers on, you know, the interaction design guidelines, and we need to look at, you know, like what we're getting from Apple and Google, and we need to look at, you know, external solutions like Lottie and After Effects. But what I'm trying to say is, and maybe this is common sense to all of you, it can be so easy to get stuck in, but then you kind of end up in this situation where you're fighting fires and there's still like an arsonist running around setting them. Not that I'm saying that Dressed works like that. That's maybe a horrific analogy. But I have found in my professional career that fantastic UX designers will actually make bad experiences if the process isn't there to support them in doing design well. And by process, I mean everything from that early stage of how are KPIs set, who decides what is good enough, all the way through to what's your design pipeline, what tools are you using, how do you hand off to engineers. Again, who conducts your research? You know, oh my gosh, so much to think about from Jaslyn's talk on research. I feel so inspired. I want to go and hire a researcher tomorrow. But yeah, so like that entire process has such a huge effect on how you know, how effective any eventual UX design is going to be. And I have firsthand experience now that, you know, just solving the issues that are in your products aren't going to fix that process, and that's not going to be a long-term solution. So, you know, and the caveat I also wanted to add here was that not everything is double diamonds. You know, now that you've decided you actually do need to analyze the process of your company, you know, and I'm sure for some of you, you know, some of you are in leadership positions, some of you are moving to a company with leaders into a leadership role, some of you might be promoted into it. No matter where you stand, I think one of the best things to do is to step back and take some time to say, okay, what does a good UX process look like for us? Because it will change depending on the stage of your company, depending on the skill set within your team, depending on, you know, kind of, again, your KPIs and your goals. So I say most things are double diamonds because I do quite fundamentally believe that. But one of the things I wanted to point out here was that with Dressed, you know, I explained at the start, we have all of these amazing collaborations with luxury brands and models and agencies, which is, oh, so cool, so fantastic, so much cooler than I am. I feel, you know, very unfashionable some days. But one of the different things there is actually, we realize that we do need to have a sign-off process in a lot of ways, because we're working with industries that work in a much more waterfall method, you know, where a contract needs to be signed 6 months ahead, agreeing what the interface is going to look like. And for those of you working in an agile iterative sprint environment, that might sound absolutely anathema. But for us, that made sense. So, you know, now our design process, and we're still working on it. Again, some of my designers are in the call and they know this. We're still working on improving it, but we've realized we need to have some of those aspects of a waterfall method of, you know, getting sign off from different people and like checking things in the right channels, as well as having that rapid iteration in order for us to satisfy both parts of the business that might work with industries that work in different ways. And, you know, no matter like what areas you work between, you might have some of those similar challenges. And this comes into something that I think ties to the previous point too. The third lesson I learned was that your design team and the skills that they have to evolve with the company. Now, you know, we always grow and companies grow too, hopefully. But I think we've all experienced that feeling of, you know, what the skills that you need and what you're expected to do on a day-to-day basis working in a company of 80 people or a design team of 10 people all collaborating together will be very different than if you are the first designer in a startup with 4 people. The problem is, if you're working at a fast-paced startup, you might go from 4 people or 8 people to 80 people within a year. And that's not too much of an issue. But when you start managing a design team and working with designers, you have to recognize that, some people might have joined a company when it was 10 people. And they were expected to fulfill a certain role, have a certain sort of design process, work in a certain sort of way. And if the company has grown to 80, those people need to grow themselves and have different expectations on what their output will be, how they'll work with people, the cadence of their work. And that means that the skill sets that you will have to employ when you're hiring or growing a design team might be quite different than what you'd expect. So I know this image is pretty famous for being one of those like stupid images that the guy literally made it saying, I hope this ends up in a real life design presentation someday, because it's so ridiculous, because it's totally meaningless. So I've used it here, so he can be happy with that now. But what I wanted to say to this image is, and again, maybe it's anathema, but what we've realized in our team is that, actually people with both that visual design skill set within user interface design and the research and usability and wireframing and prototyping skill set, having a combination of those is really good for where Dressed is right now, because of the team size, the cadence we're working, the sort of releases we've got to hit to. And I'm sure some of you in this room will totally disagree with that that's the right way to work. But for me and for how I'm leading my team, that is the best way that they can work with the people around them. The thing that you have to recognize is that that's probably not going to be the same a year from now, but you may have the same designers in your team. So there's 2 ways to kind of go about that clash, where you might end up with people that either want to do really different work than they're now expected to do. The first thing is actually speaking to the people you manage, the people you work with. What do they actually enjoy doing? What brings them happiness in the day, and what are their goals? And I think no matter what level you are leading at, you can do that. People, whether you're just working alongside people in a kind of team lead capacity, or if you're leading a discipline for an entire company, it's never too early to actually start speaking with people about, well, what do you actually want from your career? How can I help support you with that on a day-to-day basis? Even if that's just emphasizing different parts of the job, giving them specific tasks, or finding other parts of the business that someone says, oh, I'm actually really interested in learning scripting, realizing like, oh, okay, well, we're actually going to need some more technical UX designers going forward. Maybe we can start pairing you with people and getting you towards that. So I think it's just so important to kind of recognize that and see how people, your business will grow, the needs of your design team will change, but the people might not. So you got to have a strategy for how you're going to grow them too. And lesson number 4, final one, is that enthusiasm is infectious. You may not tell. Hopefully, some of you are smiling right now. I hope you're not all like crying into your 5 p.m. wine as I was previously. But this is probably the short and sweet like final point that I wanted to leave with you. When you're working in a liminal space, in something that is undefined, it's difficult to understand, what does good UX process look like? How are we going to succeed as a business? What is our market fit? You have so many unknowns. It's very easy to get disheartened. It's very easy to, like just become uncertain. The point I wanted to leave you with on this one is that as a leader, no matter what level you're at, it starts to become more and more of your responsibility to set the tone for the team and to set the standard of not of happiness. I'm not saying you have to be happy all the time, but I am saying that you have to in some way believe in the vision of what you're doing, because when you're in these liminal spaces, who else is going to do it? It becomes your responsibility as a design leader. Design leadership is not just knowing what a good process is, it's not just knowing what a good tool is. It starts to become vision work and like holding the vision of what your product should be, what your game should be, and like how you're going to navigate those difficult things. Because the fantastic thing is the way that you approach problems and the way that you approach challenges and approach the work that you're doing will start to spread infectiously throughout the people that you work with, both up the management chain and kind of like along to your directs. And they will start to adopt this mindset too. And I've truly seen this happen, you know, both in Dress, but also in previous roles I've worked in. It can be difficult, but it can make such a huge difference to like actually the end output for the user when the people on your team are really caring and passionate and like driving forward what it should be. So let's pull that all together in a easy to share, not saying you should share it, please don't. No embarrassing tweets, although I'm sure I'll turn my phone on and there will be many. So these are my 4 key lessons for UX leadership in liminal spaces. First one is develop a shared language so you can clash productively with each other. The second one, identifying structural issues is your key responsibility as a design leader, and it's the biggest way you can make an impact to the end user experience. Third, your design team must evolve as the company vision crystallizes, and that's going to happen regardless, but you have to be conscious of it as a leader. And finally, infect everyone with your enthusiasm, and don't infect them with anything else, please. But enthusiasm is more than okay to infect people with, and it will make a huge difference to not only how it is to work with your team, but also the product you end up shipping. And that's it for me. Thank you all very much for listening to me. And does anyone have any questions, I guess is the point now.
Thank you, Caitlin, for that great talk. I have one question to start with. You mentioned at the start of your talk about the language differences. And one thing I find in my role is I work in a company that has teams distributed around the globe. And the big challenge is the cultural differences and the importance that different cultures place on certain aspects. So do you have any tips for dealing with that?
Totally. So that's a fantastic point, Chris. I actually read a very good book on this when I moved to Sweden a few years ago called The Culture Gap, maybe it is. It's got a yellow cover. I'll look it up and post it into the chat once I've stopped sharing my screen. But that had some fantastic points on, like, absolutely, when you're working with teams around the world, everyone has a different expectation for what business should look like. So for me, moving to Sweden, it was almost very frustrating to begin with, because one of the things about Swedish working culture is power of consensus. Everyone has to have a say in every decision that happens, generally. And that, you know, and also fika culture. Fika is cinnamon rolls and coffee, and you might have that several times a week in the office at 3 p.m. And so there's this culture of, you know, we sit there with a coffee and a kanelbulle, and we, you know, talk about what design, you know, if this is the right way to go with design. And I think, you know, bringing some empathy to that, no matter what those challenges are, you know, whether it's, you know, working with people from the States who have a more like directorial, you know, people speak over each other a lot more, and that's not rude. That's about saying, like, I'm so passionate about this idea that I'm going to talk really loudly about it, and so that everyone follows my idea. The first step is like recognizing what those different business cultures are, and that, you know, people might not be, you know, trying to misunderstand you or, you know, trying to get in the way of the process. They just have a different expectation of what good looks like. So first is understanding, you know, learning a little bit about the different business cultures around you. I think, so I actually have some slides at the end of this that I cut out because my talk was getting quite long. And one of the points I wanted to make on shared language is literally create a glossary. That could be, and, you know, we've actually just done this recently at Dress, or just been working on it, of, okay, well, you know, when someone says, you know, it could be really basic things. When someone says a photo shoot, what does that mean in the context of Dress? What does it mean for our back-end engineers? What does it mean for the content people who write the descriptions of it? Making sure there's totally aligned. You know, actually having a document of that can be really, really helpful. Or if you're working more with visual designers, having a visual glossary. You know, this is a luxury app. This is what luxury looks like in app. Or this is what a snappy animation looks like. helping to kind of like almost like put descriptions or words or pictures to shared concepts people might have, and then they can refer back to, can be really beneficial.
Oh my God, that was so good. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Nice.
I've officially been influenced to start a shared glossary with my team.
Yes.
So I think this is going to be like the golden mine to solving a lot of my problems right now. But I had a question. So we all know good UX processes lead to good design and ultimately leads to us product and digital folk feeling amazing about what we're making and super, super happy. But my question to you is, how important is it to get engineers to understand good UX processes too, especially when they're interested in being part of, you know, the really juicy discovery part of it?
That is a fantastic question, Lena. Thank you. So I actually didn't end up covering this in my talk. Probably one of the things that I had in the backlog I was going to talk about and forgot about. You have to build allies around the business, absolutely, that care about UX. And I think that's actually one of the biggest ways to, you know, if you're on a limited budget or you have a small team or you're in a startup, finding the other people that care about the end user experience is invaluable, because you know, I've worked with those engineers that really care are the people that are going to spend, you know, they're going to take that bug that's like the menu doesn't collapse in the right way, so the player doesn't understand where they sit in the navigational hierarchy. They're going to be the person that prioritizes that and cares about it. So you, like, I think number one, you have to like always have to find those people. For us in Dressed, you know, again, I was going to talk about it and totally forgot. We have some amazing, actually, data analysts that have a really great focus on user research. So we've been able to, and qualitative user research as well as quantitative. So we've been able to lean on our data analytics team when we don't actually have as much research capacity as we would like in the design team. So that's like been a fantastic, you know, collaboration there, which is really great. When it comes to involving engineers early, number one, I do totally believe in it, but you also have to recognize that engineers have their own perspective. This is why, different talk than this one, you know, in some games companies, traditionally you might not have had a UX designer. You might have had a game designer that does a lot of wireframes, and then a UI artist that comes in and kind of makes them pretty. And what I would always argue in that situation is, you know, the role of a designer, UX designer, in any team meeting or in any decision making is to keep like the user and, you know, the user's goals and what that end user experience is going to be at the forefront of their heads when they're making decisions, when they're arguing things. You know, that's the hat they put on. The problem when you know, if we're talking about bringing engineers in, they will have, generally engineers will have the perspective of what is going to be best for our tech stack, what is going to be, you know, easiest to implement with the current technology we have. And, you know, and that's great, right? You need that perspective, but you also need to make sure that you're balancing that between what's going to be best for the eventual user experience. Same working with game designers. You know, game designers, a lot of them have a great user-centered focus, but sometimes they will have more focus as well on like, what is the vision for the game? What would, you know, the ideal, you know, the best game we want to make? Sometimes that actually might not be the best game for your specific target users and your target audience. So that's why I think absolutely get as many of those perspectives in. Having those kind of broad, you know, team like ideation for whatever feature you're working on could be super valuable. I just love dropping my really ugly Figma files into our Slack group and saying like, hey, what do you think? Because then the engineers that are busy, you know, working on back-end data structures and like far too smart to engage with my shenanigans can focus on that. But then the engineers that care about UX can kind of come in and give their perspective nice and early. And sometimes I can ignore it, but a lot of the times it actually can be really valuable. But thank you for the question.
No, I love that. Thank you so much. I'm trying to change my perspective about engineers that are passionate about being involved in discovery. So thanks. So going to the chat, Seb Long, who's from Player Research, has a question for you. They say, lesson 3 resonates so hard. Your design team must evolve. For so many studios, this means going from zero UX research and total confidence in game design, evolving to adding research where rationale doubt is encouraged, a total 180. Any advice for helping teams make this flip?
That's a great question, Seb. And also, hello, it's been a while. So, and you know, I've ended up in that situation before, specifically when I was at King. We didn't have great UX research culture for a while, and that really rapidly shifted around after a while. And I think it's all about executive buy-in, which sounds really boring, but in order for, and this actually ties back into Jaslyn's talk perfectly, in order for research to be effective, it needs to have the stakeholders of the business. Number one, understanding why it's important, and number two, like caring about actioning it. And here, when it comes to stakeholders, I think it is both, the people that are deciding KPIs and metrics, whether that's the head of production, the CPO, CTO, CEO, and actually also people who are leading game design as well. I've worked with game designers across the broad spectrum of ones that are more, ideas people that, just love coming up with cool ideas and then kind of making a few sketches and running away and do something else, to ones that have been heavily invested in analyzing and running user research, as Ariel is, who might be in the chat right now. But I think one of the best ways that you can kind of catalyze that and have that switch is to get the people that might be against it, whether that's the executives, or whether that's your game designers or other people in the business that are resisting that approach to research and insights, getting them watching a playtest. Because when someone watches a playtest and they see, oh, people actually can't click on that button because it's way too small, or like they don't understand what this game is about because the text is really long and people just skip over it and try to play. And maybe that sounds really basic, but my biggest win in actually actioning user research insights and getting more investment in it is getting the people that write the budgets to be involved in some way. And that can involve some political wrangling. But the best way to get user research on the timeline is to get time with the executives that will either make it happen or not. Thank you for that, though.
I think we have one final question in the Q&A panel. How do you develop the careers of your linees to better fit the team structure? So how do you get them to buy into your vision or strategy or culture?
That is a fantastic idea, or a fantastic question. Thank you who asked. So I think number one, the first thing to recognize is, or maybe this isn't the best for the company. What I always like to recognize with the people I manage is we're both working here for a while. There's a chance that we won't be in the future. I might leave, you might leave, something could happen to the company, anything. What I'm trying to do for you as a direct is look at where your skills are at now, look at where you want to be a year from now, and also look at where you want to be 5 years from now and try and get us there together. And I think when you're honest with the people that you manage about, my job as a manager for Dressed or for whatever business I'm working for is to get the best out of you. People understand that generally. It's my job to get the best out of you for the business. I, as a person, want to help use that experience however we can to get the best for you 5 years from now. Luckily, I've, been at places that have given me the leeway to say, okay, this person is really strong in animation. So it would actually be really fantastic. We have this kickoff project that's, like trying to prototype new ways of adding animation to the game. Let's get them working on that. And I can make the business case for that, however it need be. But I think it's like, another thing you have to recognize is a lot of people are not used to being managed like this, maybe a more traditional hands-off approach of like, okay, just do your job. And if you're not performing, I'm gonna be angry at you. But I think it's like recognizing that it will take some time for people to get used to you kind of caring about their career, to be honest, and to build that trust up with someone. But when you do have that, I think it comes back to the enthusiasm, right? If you can show that you're enthusiastic about someone else's career and where they want to go, and are asking them those questions, giving them the resources, and also giving them the time and space and giving them the feedback, they will give back more to you through their role and through their day-to-day work. So thanks for that question. Oh, I love helping people with their careers so much. I do a lot of mentoring outside of work too, and it's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about, apart from giving design talks.
So Kelly, not only will we'll get you back for another talk later in the year or next year, I think you've also volunteered to be a mentor. So we'll certainly
Oh my God, that is happening, isn't it?
And it's on record now, so you can't take that away. We have one, I think, final question. I think it kind of relates to the issue we had before about presenting to the senior stakeholders. How would you see company or management team support when it comes to the involvement of design teams and process? So the experience of this I've had in a large corporation is that when you're presenting to senior stakeholders, you pretty much get 10-15 minutes to get your point across. And if you do it, you'll get buy-in. If you don't, that's probably your chance gone. So I think any tips you have around that would be really useful for our attendees.
Totally. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the most difficult challenges there is. So right now, I have the utmost luxury, and it really is a luxury, to be working somewhere that I have a lot of oversight about how my team works, and an executive team that is 100% bought in behind the way that I want to run that and the way that I want to change that process. That doesn't mean that I don't need to make business cases and make plans and argue for these things. But it's one of the luxuries about being in a senior leadership position, but in a smaller company, and that it can be easier to get that face time with execs. However, I've worked on the opposite side, specifically when I was at King. King, at the time I was there, probably 2,000 people. Don't know what size it is now. 2,000 people, and I was, just a little UX designer managing a team of 2 other UI UX designers, just 3 people in one small studio. And number one, I think one of the best ways that you will prove what a better UX process is kind of by guerrilla doing it on the sly. So not entirely changing everything, but implementing small changes that you can prove are valuable to the business. Whether, that might not be directly applicable into the metrics of the product you're shipping, but it could be, applicable to the metrics of the team that you're in. Maybe you look at like, okay, actually, could be something simple. If we reduce the amount of, we were just talking about this on Twitter earlier today, we make our pipeline a little bit simpler for how we're handing off things to engineers, in any way that we can, whether that's just changing the way we write our documentation, or having a clear pipeline so designers don't have to spend as much time on it. You can actually prove that then to your product manager. Actually, design, it's taken 20% less time for design tickets to go through and into engineering than it did previously because of this change. And again, like Jaslyn was saying previously, once you start to have these metrics and these examples of how design can be beneficial, you build up momentum in being able to affect larger design changes within the company. That would be my first tip. My second tip is, again, finding those executive stakeholders that will buy into you. At some point in the business, the company has to believe in good UX process in some way. But, and sometimes they will hire people at very senior leadership level. At King, we had this, someone was hired into a UX, VP of UX role, I think, or VP of UX research that helped to facilitate that. But it's about finding those, the head of the studio or whoever, the people that care, that might not necessarily have a UX background or a research background, but will be more amenable, and kind of getting them to fight your case, as well as just you kind of valiantly standing and saying, we should be doing more testing. But thank you for that question. It's a good one. It's a difficult one.
Thank you. So we're approaching 8 o'clock now, and we will look to close the event. I'd like to thank both our speakers for giving great informative talks. I'd like to thank Lena for putting this event together with admittedly very little support from me, even though I said I would help out. So I really do appreciate that. We have obviously the next event coming up on I believe it was the 18th of February. And Rick, who is no longer on the call, has been a star and has got all the details ready for that. So that will go on the website as soon as possible, but then will go out in the newsletter probably the Thursday or Friday before the 18th, so the week before. As I said at the start, we're always looking for people to become mentors. If you have an idea for a talk, we have events with themes on healthcare, automotive design, accessibility is coming up in May. So please do reach out to us, but most importantly, please do keep attending these events. We will keep running these events no matter how long the lockdown period continues, or where we can't really run the face-to-face events as we would like, but we will keep going. So please do keep joining, please do keep signing up, please do keep attending. There will be a post-event survey that goes out shortly after the event this evening, so any comments, please let us know and we will take them on board. So thank you all. I wish you all a good evening and take care. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, good night. For those wondering, the recording will be available in a few weeks on our YouTube channel, UXPA-UK.
And just a final point, I know there are many people still on who would like to have discussions. We are going to look at ways we can have networking style events, more informal, break out into rooms, etc. So we are looking at that. So please let us know if that's something that is interesting to you. Thank you.